Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss A Christmas Story Christmas, starring Peter Billingsley, Aaron Hayes, River Drosh, Julianne Lane, Julie Haggerty, Scott Schwartz, R.D. Robb, Davis Murphy, Zach Ward, and Ian Petrella, directed by Clay Cadis. Now, before I get into this movie, I've seen one thing Clay Cadis has done, and I don't remember the name of the movie, but I remember seeing it on his IMDb. But there was only one thing of his I've seen, and I don't, again, remember. But, anyways, and welcome back to A Christmas Story after doing that movie last year. And I'm not going to do its secondary sequel, A Christmas Story 2. Forget it. I'm just following Ralphie's story. So, this is what this is. I'm happy to return for this. And is it going to be a good one? Let's find out and see. It's Christmas time in 1973 in the city of Chicago, and Ralphie Parker, returned by Peter Billingsley, writes a novel and is married to Sandy, played by Aaron Hayes, with two kids, Mark and Julie, as they wait for Grandma and Grandpa, aka Ralphie's parents, and his novel called to come by, and his novel called Neptune's Oblivion is a miss to all the publishers as they're bored by it, while Ralphie dreams of him winning the prize and calls the publisher a moron after dismissing him. And I didn't want to go back to what made the first movie so good while he narrates his life story. And Ralphie's mom calls to tell him his dad passed away and can't go to Chicago, so the family goes to Grandma back to his old town on Cleveland Street and visits Mrs. Parker, who's his real mother. And Ralphie thinks this Christmas will be a disaster. And this opening is good, but not as good as the original. And if anybody thinks this is as good or better than the original, it's not. But it is a good comeback for a new generation. Mrs. Parker has a lot of casseroles after Ralphie's old man's passing, as Mark and Julie get picked on by snowman terrorists, let's call them, for the rest of the show, running over their snowman and steals Mark's scarf, and they'll get them back later in the film, which was making me cringe on the whole bullying thing. Ralphie goes to a bar where his good friends Flick and Schwartz own and hang out at and have a drink with them and have fun with them, as Schwartz still had the bad luck since 4th grade, and the movie does a good job at making me remember the past like it was a blast. Ralphie wakes up the next morning at Sandy, and they get by Sandy, and they get Christmas decorations down from the attic, and bumps into the Christmas tree that Ralphie and his old man hated, and brings it down to as the carolers come by the house and sing for the mother, while Ralphie, Sandy, Mark, and Julie leave the house to get a Christmas tree, and get a giant one. Takes it for $4, which is kind of humorous, but not really. Ralphie sets up the Christmas tree, and he, with his mother and Sandy, sit there and don't help the kids while watching the kids having some wine. And as the kids decorate the tree, they complain about how the adults are just sitting there as they decide to help it. As Ralphie puts up the star on the tree, which can be Christmas with a star and an angel, either way. So I admire the movie for having the Christmas spirit. Ralphie's little brother Randy travels for work, as he calls him and says he can't make it, as Ralphie baits him, and his wife Sandy goes ice skating, and as she gets out of the house and she slips and has a bone sprained, and Mark, Julie, and a neighbor kid escape the snowman bullying, Mark becomes bait for kids to pick up on, and he thinks of them as a family for the one scene of Western, which was unnecessary, sure, but it's familiar. Ralphie and the family go to the mall, as the kids see Santa Claus, while Mrs. Parker has a drink, and Sandy, because of her broken leg, joins her, and Ralphie shops for the kids, and this is reaching to a familiar territory, which is comfortable for sure. As Ralphie finishes Christmas shopping, Mark and Julie get done with Santa Claus, as they get asked she asks for a new radiator, which cracks me up just because Ralphie puts eggs in the radiator that they have in their car, just as they sing Jingle Bells Batman Smells. And the radiator breaks down, and Mark and Julie throw snowballs as Ralphie and Sandy join him, or them, I'll say, and throw snowballs at Julie's head by accident, I'll say. And as they reach the hospital, the trunk opens and they get robbed by Christmas thieves. And these scenes are funny as I was getting comfortable with it. Ralphie and Sandy tell Mark and Julie that Christmas will be different this year as Ralphie takes Mark to the bar, and Flick makes Mark a bartender for a few hours as Ralphie approves. Meanwhile, Julie finds an adorable puppy and asks the kid for a reward off screen. And to be fair, that was a really cute puppy, and I can't wait to see what the reward is later in the film. Flick triple dog dares Schwartz to ride a ramp, and he will stop so that he will stop bugging him about his bad luck and will cover his tab at the bar. And as they get to the ramp, Schwartz does ride the ramp and hurts his back and suddenly survives as he belches really loud. And every patron at the bar went sledding on, and this scene made me laugh as Mark breaks his arm. As he gets home, Ralphie tells Sandy Mark broke his arm, and I like these scenes for how funny they were, and maybe a little bit still is. And Mark and Julie hears the snowman terrorists, and they tell the story of how Ralphie beat up Scott Farkas, and they decide to get the snowman terrorists by breaking their snowmobile, and Mark gets his scarf back, and one of them pees in their pants, which is quite a crack up, even though it's not funny for that kid, sure, but while Ralphie hears his obituary is not worth telling, so he throws it away as he decides to write about his old man just as private. And I like the spirit this movie has for its Christmas, as it's very spiritual. It's evening on Christmas Eve as the star drops and breaks, and Ralphie tries to get the star at a store, but every place is closed, so Ralphie goes to Flick's bar and borrows his star despite it's closed, and he gets stopped by Scott Farkas as a police officer. And Ralphie believes he's going to either get beat up or serve some years in prison or killed or something. And as he envisions Sandy divorcing him versus Mark as a British man versus Julia is pregnant. And we get back to real life as Scott takes him home, and we learn one of the snowman terrorists was his son, and he says they're worse than he is, and he gives Ralphie the star. And I enjoyed the familiar presence of the original cast members as well as the new actors. It's Christmas morning, and the kids are happy because they have presents that were stolen when the old man bought them before he ever passed away, and every gift was open. And Julie gives Ralphie a new radiator for the car, and Richie's obituary about his old man gets him the newspaper, thanks to Sandy, as she believes it's the best thing he's ever written. And the newspaper he works for wants to know if he has more stories, as Flick and Schwartz, as well as Randy and a few others and the rest of the neighborhood, join them for Christmas dinner. And his book unfortunately flopped, and the climax is joyous and comfortable, despite it's not necessary after watching like the original like I did. I'm not going to review that sequel, but yeah, let's see how this goes. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 6.9 out of 10. Not quite as good as the original, but it's comfortable to be in familiar territory as it's funny sometimes. But is it necessary to watch it after the original? Not really, because the reason is the original is a much better movie than this is, as it has some funny moments in it, and I like how spiritual it was, which made me happy at the end of the day. I do like seeing the original actors back in their roles as well as new cast members, and the climax was very joyous, and it's a recommendable movie if you like the original, and you'll be comfortable watching this movie, as it's a recommendation in a way that it's not necessary to see after the original, but have a good, comfortable time with it, as it's playing or it's streaming on HBO Max. And yes, I already know that it's not Christmas yet, but it will be soon. So don't murder me yet, because it's almost there. But it came out this weekend, so I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for returning to A Christmas Story. And until then, early we wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.